In the vast desert to the south of the human empire live a people so adapted to one of Alluvium's most inhospitable environments. Nomads roaming from oasis to oasis, huge bug-like walking oases and flying manta rays roam the strange land. What kind of people do such conditions breed? Come find out as we learn about the Chun, the violent warrior people that are considered to be the scourge of the earth. For as long as any tribe could remember, the Chun had always been following the Oasis Walkers. The Oasis Walkers are large, insect-like, with the top of the shell being so huge, an entire oasis could fit on its back. It digs into the sand, covering most of the body, except for the top, and uses its large tentacles to suck the moisture out of the deep ground. It is believed that the Oasis Walkers are the cause for the creation of the very desert the Chun live in. Since his birth, Munham was fascinated with the history of his tribe and people. The Chun did not keep records, let alone even have a writing system. Most of their traditions were kept through stories remembered by word of mouth. This came as a shock to Munham, who at a young age showed much intelligence. He saw the complete disorganization his tribe had, and how through a little logistics, it would make living in the desert easier. When he would bring up these concerns, be hit by his parents and told to shut up. In addition to a vast intelligence, Munham was weak and sickly. Whenever he was sick, he would try and problem solve a lot of the issues the tribe had. Things such as food and water were a rare commodity in the ocean of sand. When an oasis walker ran out of water, it often spelled doom for it and its tribe. Luckily, it was a very rare occurrence due to the oasis walkers attracting animals and being the Chun's source of water. But Munham heard stories from refugees that his own tribe accepted such things occurred. When questioned, it was revealed to Munham that the Chun had no concept of moderation. Whenever they came across a source of food or water, they would drink and eat it dry. Munham realized a careful walk between death and survival. His people were really walking. He would have to act if he was going to survive and save his tribe. The first order of business was a matter of gaining strength. If he was going to have his ideas heard, he'd need to be able to impress his chieftain and other tribe members through sheer brute strength. For many months, Munham practiced sparring, and over time, the once skinny frame became large and broad. He became less sick, and his strength began to show. His father, once embarrassed by having a weak child, now began to show some sort of pride when he looked at his son. Munham did not reciprocate his father's feelings. He saw his father as a fool, running towards a mirage in the desert, like the rest of his tribe. Only, at least his tribe didn't beat him. During the next liqa, Munham would express his concerns, only to be laughed at by the chief. Expecting this reaction, Munham challenged the chief. The chief would have to accept, for if he didn't, it would be considered shameful and embarrassing for not putting what his tribe saw as a weakling in his place. His tribe gathered in a circle, leaving plenty of room for Munham and the chief to fight. The chief was more than confident that he'd win. You don't rise to a position of power in Chun society without being the best fighter. Munham, understanding his situation, was more than stoic. He'd been training for months and preparing for this exact moment. There were no weapons allowed for these kinds of fights. If you kill, you do so with your bare hands. Other than that, there were no rules. He knew the only way to save his tribe and his people was to lead the charge away from their own destruction. And the only thing the Chun respected, the only thing they understood, was violence. If he could shame the chief or even kill him, he'd be able to take the reins, and he could put his plan into motion. If he failed, then his people would spend the rest of their existence in this desert, never to rise to a better way of life. This was the deciding fate of the entire Chun race. Drums sounded, the chief let out a roar, and charged towards Munham. Thinking fast, Munham sidestepped, allowing his opponent to fly by, straight into the crowd. Munham was not as big as his opponent, but he understood that if he could stay light on his feet, he could tire the chieftain out, and then the fight would be over. Enraged, the chieftain came at Munham again, swinging heavy each and every time, only to find that his punches hit air. The chieftain was getting tired. His anger forced him to punch rapidly as much as he could, trying to hit Munham, missing every time, only to find Munham on the other side of the arena. Eventually, the chieftain stopped to take a breath. This was a huge mistake. As soon as he did, Munham struck, and struck hard, throwing punches to the chieftain's eyes, nose, throat, pulling on his braided hair. Munham climbed to the top of his opponent and began wailing on him. Going into an almost drug-induced high, he began to feel some sort of liquid in his hands, and he stopped to see what it was. Coming out of the trance, he saw that it was blood that covered his knuckles. And he stopped for a moment. Munham wasn't sure if killing his chieftain was what he wanted. Surely he had proved his strength by now beating the strongest Chun in his tribe. They would have to take him serious, but what if they didn't? What if in order to speak sense into his leaders, he had to beat them every time? Sure, they might listen to him this once, but what if that wasn't a guarantee for the future? No. He knew the only way to give his people a better life, an easier way of living, was to take control and solidify it. He put both his hands around his chieftain's throat, pressed into it as hard as he could, and waited for the struggling to stop. Cries of glory sprung up around him by his fellow tribesmen. As a reward, Munham was entitled to everything his opponent owned, including wife and children. Munham took the home of the old chieftain, but not the wife. He didn't see it as fair to enforce himself on her against her will. He allowed the family to stay with him until they could find another place to live, treating them very well. The chief had children with his wife, both very young. Munham felt guilty every time he looked into their eyes, knowing that they'd never see their father again. The only thing that allowed Munham to sleep at night was the comforting thought that he was doing it for a greater good, and perhaps, because of his actions, they'd eventually be able to live a better life. He treated the children as his own, but was careful not to overstep his boundaries. The chieftain's wife, being a woman of tradition, never disrespected Munham, but held an ounce of hatred for him, for taking her husband. Understanding this, Munham did what he could to try and make amends for his actions, helping her out wherever he could, making sure she lived comfortably. At the same time, Munham began putting his ideas into action. He put limits on the number of people allowed to walk into the tribe, ensuring things such as famine would never be a problem. He taught his people how to domesticate animals and have a steady source of food, and not to overhunt so they can return to the same place and find more animals there. Under his care, his tribe began to flourish. The most impressive achievement, figuring out how to control the oasis walkers so they would go as they pleased. How Munham did this was by ensuring they had enough water stored for a long trip, and then encasing some of the water with sand, and having a group of people walk in the general direction of where they were going. It is a massive effort and extremely difficult to pull off. This is because after some time, not sensing water in the ground, oasis walkers will simply get up and attempt to find some more. To remedy this, the Chun would have to dump water around the oasis walker, so it doesn't get thirsty. But with Munham's logistics, he was able to pull it off. However, with all these policies in place, life in the desert is still hard. You'd have to find a more suitable place for them to live. The religion of the Chun is simple. They worship the giant oasis walkers they follow around. The religious leaders of the Chun are shaman. The way the shaman practice their magic and cast their spells is by small amounts of self-mutilation.
Hey guys, thanks for watching the video. If you're interested, please join the Discord. I'm trying to make an active community there. I need some moderators and anyone who's generally interested in talking about memes or history or the lore. I definitely would check that out. Also, please do check out my editor. I'm going to leave his channel in the description as well. Also, please leave any thoughts you have on the story, the video in general. I'm seriously interested in knowing what you guys think.
We love you.
Part 2 coming soon. Thanks.